to the Cozy Corner of Cinema, episode number 153, being recorded on Monday, March 3rd, 2025 at 6:33 p.m. I hope you all have been doing exceptionally well. I hope you all have been focused and determined on making your dreams come true, on whatever artistic endeavors you may want to proceed with. It is your life to live. It is your time to have. So hopefully you are using it to the utmost that you find most beneficial. So here we are, man. The Academy Awards were last night, and lots of talk. Always fun to have discussions with colleagues, with acquaintances about the films and the people whom you thought should have won, who did win, this or that. It's always a lot of fun. You can't really take these things too seriously. It's more kind of like just a gathering of the year in review, in terms of the big films at the time. The 10 films that were talked about that year that were going to represent that year. And Sean Baker's Anora walked away with the big prize of the Best Picture Award. And it was fun to talk with acquaintances while the Oscars were on, kind of spitballing, opinions back and forth. We agreed on some, disagreed on others, but ultimately it was just a lively and fun conversation. And the Oscars were just a lot of fun to watch. I mean, I was Team Brutalist all the way. I still am. I think that's just such an incredibly exceptional film, such an intelligently made film for adults, such a rarity of a film like that on such a scope. And, it didn't really get a whole lot of awards, but my gosh, of all the films, nominated, that is truly, to me, the most notable standout of just being an incredibly engaging, thought-provoking, just a really film made for adults, which is just so refreshing with some of the other films kind of in the circulation. But what was I going to say? It was interesting. I think the only real big upset that we were all sort of unanimously agreed upon was kind of the Best Actress award. We were all pretty sure that Demi Moore was going to win for The Substance, a really wonderful performance, and we were all shocked when she didn't receive the award, and as well as the actress from I'm Still Here. Let me get her name up. Fernanda Torres. Both really solid performances, and losing out to Mikey Madison from Anora, a very strange decision there. You can't really compare performances, films, because they're so uniquely different. I mean, Anora, The Substance, and I'm Still Here are three very different kinds of films, all with three solid leading performances. Much in the same way when you look at like the Best Actor category. It was great to see Adrian Brody win for his performance as Laszlo Toth in The Brutalist. And it's interesting because you have, Timothée Chalamet nominated for A Complete Unknown, and you have Sebastian Stan nominated for The Apprentice, and it's two solid performances, but it's interesting to kind of step back and go, these are really good impressions of real people. So it's sort of like you got the impression on one level, and then you have the performance on another. So it's interesting to kind of take away from that, you can't really even compare them, so to speak, because you're going from different kinds of films, different kinds of performances. But either way, I mean, the film that I always want to win the most, it almost never happens. Oppenheimer was the exception last year, but on top of that, it was just a really exceptional year for films, at least, nominated. So when it was Oppenheimer that won, it was like, oh, it's great, I was totally Team Brutalist all the way. But man, that's just one of the great films of recent memory. Just one that's really just stuck with me. I think it's just such a brilliant, just well done, intelligent. I can't stress enough, just a film made for adults. There's no spectacle. There is nothing. The film is not worried if there's not something big happening. It's quiet dialogue sequences, really contemplative performance, really contemplative decisions by characters. The whole idea of just these people who are elevated to this great level, but are still seen as such. To quote one of the characters in the film, who's such tramps. There's one line in the film where one of the characters is trying to antagonize Laszlo, and he says, "We tolerate you," and that's meant to antagonize, but there's also a level of sincerity to it, where it's sort of like, no matter how accomplished of an architect, how brilliant of an architect he is, ultimately he's just a pendant, he's just a keychain to prop somebody else up to make them seem like they are the intellectual, they are the ones with the refined taste. The brutalist. It's like Oppenheimer, where it's just really mature films for adults on a wide mainstream level. Oppenheimer has the benefit of, you have a great filmmaker like Christopher Nolan, who's able to just mass distribute it, put it in IMAX 70 millimeter. And it's a brilliant film. It's another one of my favorites of recent memory. I loved Oppenheimer. But The Brutalist as well. Just my gosh, this is just one of my very favorite films of recent memory. And although it didn't win many awards, it's the film that has stuck with me the most, and I will continue to champion it, forever and ever. So speaking of the Academy Awards, man, there were a couple of films that I wanted to mention here, at least in context. Under the Best International Film, I'll talk about this one briefly because I saw it a couple weeks ago. But one that was a shame, it didn't really get a whole lot of talk, and it's a really solid film, directed by what's the name here, Mohamed Rasulov. It is The Seed of the Sacred Fig, and what an excellent film. When I'm talking about mature films for adults, when I talk about films that take their time, that are not concerned with if you want spectacle, if you want action, just completely mature, thought-provoking films, man. These are the films I'm gravitating more towards. So, and I like plenty of genre films. Don't get me wrong about that. I'm not, thumbing my nose up to them, but I am at this point where I'm getting far more out of films like this. And I'll talk about this briefly. I won't go into it too much. The film is readily available at home to rent, distributed by Neon. Filmed in secret in Iran, and I think it's best to kind of not know a whole ton about the film. It's a film that's almost 3 hours. It comes in at 2 hours and 47 minutes, and it's this really solid family dynamic where we have these two daughters. I don't know their names. They are, bear with me for just a moment while I try to find who these actresses are on this page here. One moment. Well, I can only find one of the names here, but the older sister, Sana, played by Satara Maliki? Don't know how to say the name. I apologize. But her, she's living with her parents and her younger sister in Tehran, Iran, and there are some protests going on. The police are being very violent with a lot of the protesters, and the daughters have a clash of ideologies with the parents. The parents are very steadfast in their beliefs. They're not really open to a lot of differing opinions. They listen to the news, and the news tells them what they want to hear, very much like the news, real life. It's like, you're going to turn on, any of these kind of ridiculous sort of news channels. You're not going to actually hear proper news. You're going to hear, propaganda. That's sort of what they want you to hear. But anyways, at a certain point, there becomes an issue of something, and I don't really want to go too much into it because it's a big part of the film is kind of how it all unfolds. And sort of what's, who's telling the truth and who isn't. But essentially, an item goes missing, and it becomes a civil war kind of in the family of these daughters versus the parents. And you feel for some characters at one point, and then later on you're like, oh, they're taking it too far here. And a lot of the film is just trying to find out what is going on with this. And it's interesting the way the film is separated into certain portions. it'd be very easy for the film to be, I guess, messy, trying to deal with all these different sort of large sections of the film, because we have the first section, which is about these girls' lives and the protests, these violent kind of protests. I'm just a protest, violence against the protesters going on, and then in the second section, it really becomes this other part of it, and that's really all I kind of want to go into now. Because in the third section of the film, which really kind of takes up the last 40 minutes or so, or even hour, I would say, depending on, so it becomes a whole other kind of different thing of just allegiances start to shift, and you wonder what's really going on, and when is this going to go off, of this information and all that, and it's just a really smart, engaging, tense thriller, man, with a really great finale. I saw somebody else talking about the finale, and they compared it to a very popular horror film of how that film ends, and I was like, oh, that's right, that's a great comparison. But in the finale of this, there's no music, it's very tense, you're like, my gosh, and you're on the edge of your seat. It's such a well-made film, and for a film being made in secret, they do a lot with it. It's not just all interiors, there's a lot of exteriors, there's some brief kind of car chase at one point on these deserted roads. But excellent film. It seems like every year since Parasite, it seems like the Academy have tried to really kind of prop up one international film to really put in the best picture category. I mean, like, entirely international. I guess this year you could say, well, it was Emilia Perez and I'm Still Here, but this year it was I'm Still Here. We had like Minari a couple years ago, and really trying to prop up, and it's kind of a shame that this one got so overshadowed. Now the fact that got nominated, that's great. I'll put more eyes on it because it's a really excellent film, and one of my favorites that I've seen this year. But it's just like, man, this is one that I would have put like in the best picture category. Really smart, really well put together film, and don't be put off by the runtime either, because I think instinctually you go to see a film and you see a longer runtime and you're like, all right, I'm in it for the long haul, and some films you feel the runtime, others you don't, and this sincerely did. I mean, it just flew by. I was just so engaged with the film and so engaged with what something's going to happen. You're just waiting for something bad to happen, and when it does, what's going to be the result of it. Excellent film. High recommendation there. And another film that I saw, which was apparently on the short list for the best international film, and this film, I don't know where it's from, because it's from, I think, Canada, but there's different languages spoken in the film, so truthfully I'm not really sure. They're speaking Persian and they're speaking French, but it's in Canada. Now I don't know if I don't think they speak Persian at all in any part of Canada, to my knowledge, but what do I know? But I am talking about the film from Matthew Rankin, his new film Universal Language. A surreal comedy that dances heavily with the surreal towards the end of the film. And it's a film that as I'm watching it, I know there's a lot lost in translation in terms of certain symbolism, certain meanings, especially when it comes to the third act, when a lot of the comedy is dropped and becomes a bit more, I don't want to just keep saying surreal because it's not exactly the right word, but definitely the narrative becomes a lot more loose. Certain nightmare logic sort of events start to happen where characters and actors are appearing one place and then they're here at another place. But it's such an enjoyable, funny, strange film. And I don't mean strange in an off-putting way, because sometimes you can seem like, well, this is strange for being strange, and it's just not enjoyable to watch. I've seen plenty of films where it's like, look how weird we are, look how different we are, and it's like, yeah, but you forgot to make a film, you're just trying to be weird. It's nothing, it's fine, but make a good film, And this film is strange and weird with a lot of its dialogue delivery. There's not a lot of emotion in the film. It's a lot of very straightforward kind of apathetic delivery to a lot of these things, but just some of the sequences are just so funny in this. I mean, there's one where they keep walking, and also the way that certain information is revealed in the subtitles as well. They'll show part of a building subtitle and they'll show another part of it in a couple seconds later, rather than having the entire translation at first. I mean, there's one bit where there's an advertisement for this. I think it was like a realtor. I forgot what he was on a park bench, and his slogan was cracking me up. I mean, it made me laugh out loud hard. It was just so simple, but so funny. And just some of the dialogue delivery as well here, some of the situations they have these, they have they're running this tourist this touristy sort of like walk around sort of tour in this town where there's nothing really that's going on. And they have these really gray kind of buildings with nothing on them. They're very bland, and they even at one point are like, "No, you're in the gray area. You got to get to the brown area, or the blue area, whatever it was." But it's a film uniquely its own. It feels like it's in its own kind of world. I mean, like I said, they're speaking Persian, they're speaking French, but it doesn't even feel like you're in Canada. It feels like, it's its own kind of unique sort of location. But another one, and just some of the photography in this film is just gorgeous. The way they do it, the architecture. They'll have characters just walking lined up with some of the architecture that makes for some really incredibly striking shots, where you can just take pictures of this and just be like, oh my gosh, that's a great shot right there. And it's also very funny too. Like I said, I can't stress enough. It's very funny. It's very consistently funny. And then when it gets to the more kind of otherworldly stuff towards the end, it's not going to work for everyone, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, and I won't even pretend like I understood it all, because I think this is one that I would need to look up some sort of meanings behind and watch again. But boy, just as a surface level, enjoyable, comedy with comedy drama, much more comedy than drama. Really like this film. This was another one that I'm just like, man, this is a film that's just so uniquely its own. And I should also say Matthew Rankin plays the lead in this film, Matthew. There's a couple different storylines going on in the film and how they all kind of intertwine. But excellent film nonetheless. Really like this universal language. All right, got my notepad here. Well, not my notepad, my journal. It's a very nice journal my girlfriend gifted me. And it's great for taking notes. All right, click that pen there. I don't talk a whole lot about horror films on the show. I'm not particularly drawn to a lot of horror films. I think the good ones really stand out. But I just see a lot of it I don't think are very good. I have a lot of acquaintances who are really into horror films, and they're great. They can really kind of recommend you stuff that you never heard of, or maybe films that went under your radar, or even some films that I'm like, oh boy, that cover art's not very good, and then they're like, no, it's actually really good. You got to check it out. You watch it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a solid film. There's been a couple of films now where I'm like, I don't really know about this, and then I watch it, I'm like, wow, my gosh. But I want to talk about a rewatch. I'd seen this film a couple of times. And it's a famous horror film. I rewatched it on the Arrow Video 4K that came out a couple years ago. Directed and written by John McNaughton, is Henry: Portrait of a Serial Killer from 1986, starring Michael Rooker, Tracy Arnold, and Tom Towles. Very loosely based on the real serial killer of Henry Lee Lucas, which they made another film off of him called Confessions of a Killer or Confessions of a Serial Killer, loosely based on him and Otis Toole, two real serial killers. And to my knowledge, this is a very loose look at these two people. I don't believe this is, to my knowledge, is not trying to market itself as based on a true story, because I think some things are there, but ultimately it's its own kind of narrative film. And how this film came about is interesting in its own right, where John McNaughton and someone else, I apologize, they were going to make this, I might be getting part of the story wrong, so if I do, I apologize. They're going to make this wrestling documentary, and went to get these tapes, and then the guy at the last second doubled the price, and they couldn't pay it. So then, with that money, they got commissioned to do a horror film, make it bloody and all that, and Instead, you get a really grimy, unnerving, and unsettling horror film. I love the tagline of this, which is "He's not Freddy, he's not Jason, he's real." And that's what it feels like. This was, I think, maybe the first film I saw with Michael Rooker in it. And Michael Rooker now, he's in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He works with James Gunn a lot. He's a big actor now. He was just in Horizon Chapter 1, which was cool to see. He was in Slither. He's a really solid actor, really charismatic actor. But this was the first film I had seen him in, and I was so unnerved by his performance that seeing him in these other kind of lighter roles, more comedic roles, I was taken aback. I was like, wow, this really is kind of a testament to how strong of a performance that he gives. And of course, Tom Tolles as well plays Otis in this film. And the two of them back to back, I mean, they're just so creepy. I mean, the way that I guess to give kind of a brief sort of synopsis, if I can, but this guy Henry, he moves in with I can't remember if it's his friend that he do or what. This guy Otis, and Otis is there with his sister Becky, and there's some weird kind of incestuous stuff going on. Otis is making really incestuous kind of moves on Becky, and Henry is really uncomfortable at that. But Henry, is a serial killer. There's the opening kind of scenes of these various dead bodies, very gruesome, very disturbing. And Otis, who has this like kind of fixation, he like wants to know more about what's going on. So Henry sort of takes him under his wing. And, early on they have first kind of kill, and Otis is kind of shaken up a little bit, but then he starts to really kind of get this sort of motivation of like, yeah, let's do it, let's make it grislier, let's make it uglier, it becomes more unhinged, and the dynamic between the two of them is just so great. I'm talking about before with like Demi Moore in The Substance, but it's one of these performances where, I think horror films to a certain extent, I've been pretty confident in saying that horror films to a certain extent really don't get represented at the Academy Awards. And I think when this came out, this was probably lumped in as just a very cheap kind of slasher, when I think this works as a very disturbing crime film, horror film for sure. It's even listed as dark comedy, which I guess there's a little bit of, but I think that the content is just so grisly and it's so uncomfortable to watch that it makes for such a grimy sort of watch. I'm rewatching this. I had seen this a couple of times before, and it's a short film. It's only 83 minutes, but when it got to the third act, I was like, man, I can't believe this is wrapping up already. I'm just so engaged by the film. It's a film that went through a lot of censorship. I think because of the grisliness and how real a lot of this feels. I mean, the big scene that I think the film got in a lot of trouble for was there's a home invasion scene, which is very disturbing. I mean, even watching it now all this time, the way that they film it, the way that John McNaughton films it, is just so uncomfortable, and it's so, oh my gosh, like makes your skin crawl. And the way that Tom Tolles is like fixated on this on this snuff film that he made, and he I love that line where Henry's like, why are you rewinding it, and Otis is just like, I want to watch it again. Oh God, it just makes your skin crawl. And what I'm talking about with Demi Moore, like The Substance, I mean, these are like amazing performances. I mean, Tom Tolles and Michael Rooker, these are two of the strongest performances I've seen in a film. And the fact that a film like this can kind of be put aside as like, oh, well, that's a horror film. That's not a real film. This is just a cheap kind of serial killer movie. It's like, this is ridiculous, man. It's like Bill Moseley in The Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie's film. He gives an incredible performance in that film, and that's another performance where it's just like, oh, it just gets under your skin. It's just like, my gosh, what a sinister, creepy, evil character. And it's sort of like, these films take time to really kind of is really kind of cement their legacy, cement these performances. I mean, when I mentioned like Demi Moore in The Substance, I mean it's not, that's a different kind of performance right there. But that was one where, even though I talked about it in when I was talking about the Best Picture nominees, even though I didn't love The Substance, I thought it was very good. But even I can tell you that was like a great performance, and the fact that a performance as good as that basically doesn't even get it gets recognized, but doesn't get any sort of, like, it doesn't get more fanfare from the Academy. It's like, man, I think they just really missed the mark on that one. That was just such an excellent performance, and same here as well. I should also mention Tracy Arnold. as Becky, who I wasn't really terribly familiar with. Tom Tolles was in like the Night of the Living Dead remake. He's been in like a bunch of stuff, but her I'm not too familiar with. John McNaughton would go on to do other films like The Borrower, for example, and she was in that film. And but yeah, it's just that the realism of this film, the really kind of dirty, gritty apartment that they're in. You know, you can kind of just feel the griminess. There's beer cans everywhere. I mean, it's dirty. The couch is dirty. Everything just kind of reeks of like you can sort of almost smell the film, man. It's a really nauseating film. It's not a fun film to watch. It's very upsetting and disturbing, but so powerful and so well made. And I truly do think that both Michael Rooker and Tom Tolles give two of the strongest performances in any film I've seen. I mean, these are just two great performances where, you know, when I see Michael Rooker and other stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Henry. That's this amazing performance right there that, you know, it's almost like you almost want to give him an honorary Oscar for this film because it's just so good. It's just such a great performance. The 4K looks really good as well, I should say. You know, this came out a couple years ago, and I've had this for a little while, but I hadn't seen it in quite a little bit of time. So getting to rewatch this on that 4K and still having it kind of just strike a chord so much, you know. I mean, you watch so many films, so many horror films, so many, you know, whatever, and for something like this to still really kind of hit hard, and you're just like, oh man, like, you know, it doesn't happen too often, but when it does, you're just like, man, that's really that's really the highest kind of compliment you can pay to a filmmaker like this, where it's like, man, and to the actors and, you know, everything, where it's sort of like, man, you really kind of just, you did a great gut punch where you left me kind of, you left the audience like shooken up, like, oh my gosh, you know, this is horrifying. But, you know, but hey, to quote Last House on the Left, it's only a movie. Excellent stuff. I think this is one of the strongest horror films. I mean, I mean, to me, this feels more like a crime film than anything else. But you can split hairs all you want. Call it everyone. I really don't care. I'm not trying to split hairs over, oh, this is actually a dark psychological thriller. No, this is actually a slasher espionage comedy. It's like, I don't care, man. Call it whatever you want. I call it a great film, and it is a great film. And you know, horror in particular, I like all kinds of films. You know, I'll watch, I said before, if it's legal, I'll watch it, man. You know, I'm not going to be watching anything crazy like someone beating up on a kid or on an animal or something like that. But if it's a film, I don't care what it is, man. If it's like a musical, western, comedy, horror, I don't care what it is. I'll watch it all, man. And horror in particular is one that I find I have the most trouble sort of engaging with. I see I don't see a whole lot that I love, which is, you know, I think a detriment in part of just a lot of these films, man. I don't think a lot of them hold up. You know, a lot of them just like, well, this has a good kill, this has a good moment, but how does the film overall? And so with a film like Henry, it'd be very easy to be like, well, you know, it has a couple really crazy scenes, but the film itself, whatever. But the whole film, beginning to end, and it's got a great ending too. And it's funny, I never really thought of the ending as ambiguous. I always thought it was pretty straightforward on what was going on. But it was interesting to kind of read, you know, Michael Rooker was saying that he eventually had to just flat out say, like, no, this is what it is. This is, and I'm like, well, of course it's what it is. You know, it's wild, but really solid film, really unnerving. Won't be for everybody, for sure. I mean, it's a disturbing film. It's an uncomfortable film, but man, what a powerhouse performance from Michael Rooker and Tom Tolles, and great direction from John McNaughton, man. Solid stuff overall. But I'm gonna wrap that up here, guys. So hey, man, it's March. Man, we're already well into the new year. This is the time, man, to really get going on your art, man. That book's not gonna write itself. That film's not gonna direct itself. That blank canvas you got across the room, you know, that's staring at you. You got to fill that up with paint, man. That guitar with those with the strings unplucked, man. You're gonna be the next Bruce Springsteen, Eric Clapton, man. You think they got that from sitting around all day? No way, Jose. They practiced, they performed, and now they get to reap the benefits and the rewards. And maybe you will too. We won't know if you find out until you go ahead and do it. That's all I got to say, guys. Hey, thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. Be back soon. Another People Pictures episode is coming soon. So, you know, keep an eye out for that. That's all I got to say. Thank you. Thank you so much.